Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy podcast. My name is Jed and we are reading the Phaedo and we are on a hunt to discover the meaning of life, the meaning of all life, our human destiny. How do we live in the best way, in the correct way? What are we here for? How do we know the answer to these questions? Are these questions knowable? Are they understandable? Are they provable? And if they are, if the answer to all of these most significant, important, necessary questions, if they are knowable, if they are understandable, if they are provable, can we learn how to do all of those things and communicate it to ourselves and to others artfully? Can we have an art of philosophy or art of the logos? I prefer art of the logos because philosophy is one of the most misunderstood words out there. It's literally taken to mean love of opinions, which is the opposite. Why? Because in real philosophy, we want to reach that which is, to quote the text, unopinable. Beyond belief is another cool section from the text. Quote from the text, and this is important. In order to discover the truth, we have to read the text without interpretation. We can't push our opinions onto what's there, or have our opinions censor out things that are different from our opinions. This is called interpretation. To add what isn't there or to leave out what is there. And so the act of reading without interpretation is an act of purifying our own seeing, purifying our own soul, matching our state of consciousness or state of mind to that of the authors, and going beyond opinion, beyond belief. So the act of reading with this level of integrity is a spiritual yoga. It has an effect on your state of being, your state of mind. And we are also learning what is the hierarchical arrangement of ways of thinking, cognitive functions, types of apprehending things. You can have opinions, you can have prejudices, you can have beliefs, you can have spiritual beliefs, you can have maybe a higher level, a certain kind of trust that Socrates is pointing to. But even then, that's not sufficient as we are reading. A different level beyond that, dianoia. So now we go into a new uncharted territory, which is words that we don't have an English translation for. There is no translation for the word dianoia. We loosely translate it as understanding, and we will miss the mark because what we call understanding is not dianoia. Just like what we call philosophy today is not really philosophy. It's the opposite. Okay, so we need to introduce a new language. Why? Well, if you don't have a word for something, how can you recognize it? How can you apprehend it? How can you distinguish it if you don't have that as a word unified to be able to distinguish it from other things? Like famously, there are many, many words for snow that Inuits have, who live with the snow. So we would look at snow and just see one thing, snow. That's the only word. Having 100 different words would allow you to make 100 different distinctions. You learn the language and you see through that language. And that's what we're doing here in the true game of philosophy. And so some of those words are not accessible to us in our English language. Thankfully, English has some words that other languages don't have. Russian, Bosnian, for example, Latin don't have the word the. So they are very limited. They can't do metaphysics, which is going from a example to the thing itself. But in English, we don't have a word for dianoia. So we're adding that one in. Right, which is another distinction to make. One of the reasons why philosophy is so misunderstood is we haven't had a good translation up until the last 5-10 years. This one is, I think, 5 years old or maybe 4 years old. a translation with the word dianoia or highlighted with the Greek underneath it, because sometimes the translator will use the word understanding, but will give it a different letter, a different color, give it a capital U, so we can read the Greek underneath and recognize, oh, that says dianoia. It's not understanding the way we think it is. It's a kind of understanding that Socrates has been teaching us and we have been learning in the last couple of episodes. To do with creating a hypothesis, pushing the implications, seeing whether it's sufficient and harmonious, using your loftiest vision, but directed specifically to the realm of being. It's not understanding how much rice there is in India. It's not understanding how many jelly beans there are in China. It's understanding the realm in being. Now, it's also a kind of stepping stone to an experience of that realm of being, making what we dianoia understand provable, verifiable, through our own apprehension or direct experience of that realm outside of time and space, prior to time and space, and therefore, pulling on what we learned last time, more hierarchically causal and primary, with greater power and scope and influence, the realm of being. How can we apprehend the realm of being? That's nous. We don't have a word for that. We use the word knowledge, give it a capital K, and hope people figure it out. Often translators don't translate it as knowledge, they'll translate it as wisdom, sometimes thinking, sometimes intelligence. It's all over the shop. All of the translations have been so sloppy that we wouldn't be able to figure out the mysteries. It's like you're playing Clue, trying to solve the puzzles, but sometimes the cards are all mixed up. Well, hang on a second, I thought he was in the library. Yeah, he was a second ago, but now he's in the study. What the hell? How can we solve this puzzle if all of the terms are changing? You can't. One of the reasons why awakening philosophy has only been possible in the last few years. Which is amazing, which is significant. If Owen Wilson were here, he would say, wow. Wow. And his brother would say, wow. And his whole family would say, wow. 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 It's very significant. So we're in a good place. We are able to pick it up. Also, we have a framework through which to understand why philosophy has been misunderstood, is currently misunderstood, even by those claiming to be experts. Why we are suffering the implications of not having an art of philosophy. We have an understanding, but also we can learn what we need to turn things around. For our world, for humanity, but more importantly for ourselves. We can learn an understandable, dianoia, knowable, nous, put those words together and we give it the word intelligible. It's a little extra word we can throw in there. Paradigm for understanding ourselves and reality, and to recognize its shadow, so we can solve our problems. In the text, the solving of problems is given the expression escaping the chains of fate or purification. Climbing the ladder of our development is reaching our destiny. Destiny because it's our highest goal and it's universal and it's for everybody. All intelligent, reflecting life. And so its complement or its dyad from purification is perfection. And this is what we went through last time. Look for patterns, look for twos, look for threes, because that's your skill trees. You're leveling up in the same way in a video game. You can level up certain skills. In philosophy, you level up certain apprehensions of patterns. Dianoia and nous. That's a pair. Add that to the list. Take it with you in your inventory, in your skill tree. Purification and perfection. Fate and destiny. All these patterns exist in philosophy, and that's part of the puzzle solving. That's part of the clue game, the Sherlock Holmes detective journey that we're on, while engaging in the text without adding what isn't there or leaving out what is. You got to see all the puzzles as best as you can. Of course, we have to go through it many times, because as we grow, we'll see more and more and level up. That's part of the game. So for that reason, instead of saying art of philosophy, which includes the dianoia, the understandability, the provability, the being able to discern the parts, nous, the verification and the direct experience of the paradigm itself, of being itself, and also the artful use of that to benefit yourself and others, to benefit the subject. All of those things, so far, we are collecting together to understand the idea of art. We have to develop the art of the logos, says Socrates. This is the most important thing we can do here. And if we don't, we will suffer the greatest defects of the soul. If we can't use the art of the logos in relating to people and relating to arguments, we will end up distrusting the logos, hating the logos, reviling the logos, not believing there is such a thing as the logos, not believing there is such a thing as being that we can aspect because our consciousness is of that nature in its highest aspect, and not believing there is such a thing as an art. In other words, there's no understanding, capital U, there's no knowing or enlightenment or higher dimensions of reality, balloons. And number 3, therefore there's no artful use that would require a paradigm and require an understanding of that paradigm. Just like medicine requires a paradigm of the healthy body and an understanding of how to bring forth that healthy body and recognize its deviations so we can cure sickness. There's no art of medicine. There's no art of the logos. This is the greatest problem of the soul. Socrates says, don't blame the logos reality or art. Blame your lack of having the art. Of course, the word is not blame, the word is cause. That's the cause. Blame implies wrongness and can open the door to punishment, but we've seen punishment is irrational in principle. You don't make things more good by introducing the opposite, because the good and that which wants to share in the good will withdraw or be destroyed. That was the argument to show that the soul must be immortal. Notice we didn't just trust that argument of the immortality of the soul, we understood the parts, the pieces, how they fit together. Therefore, we can apply it to other things, like whether or not punishment is rational and good, or works, or is viable. Tyranny, similar. If tyranny requires the idea that people are made better by introducing the bad, introducing slavery, introducing violence, introducing punishment, then we have the argument that no, it doesn't. And we can use it artfully. Anybody who's genuinely interested in understanding, we can walk them through the stages to see it for themselves. And it's simple. Hey, 3 comes along with oddness. Oddness has an opposite of even. If you bring in even, oddness can't be around. So too, 3 can't be around. 3 can't be even. That was the argument for the soul. The soul is that which brings in life. Life has its opposite, death. If death comes in as an idea, as a selfhood in being, life can't be present. They're opposites. Therefore, that which comes along with life, the soul, also has to withdraw or be destroyed. Right? If humans want learning or goodness, and you think, people are made more good by introducing badness or violence or punishment or guilt or shame, that badness takes away the good and takes away that aspect within our human soul. Doesn't work. This is the importance of understanding it. Similarly, a doctor wants to understand the principle behind how to cure this or that illness, so when somebody else comes in, he can apply that to a different person, to judge that person with his art, to see whether or not he's healthy or sick. So too, we are not just learning about our soul, we're learning about the structure of the argument so we can have it as an art. So if anybody comes in with a new argument about soul, about three, whether a three can be ever even, whether it's about violence, whether violence can ever be justified in order to make people better or teach people a lesson, about tyranny, whatever is on the table, whoever walks into our doctor's office, we can use the art to relate to them through that art in order to reach truth and therefore extend benefit. That's what we're learning. We're learning the art of the logos. I prefer that to art of philosophy because it's such a corrupted word today. It literally means the opposite in most circles, even those who are experts and have the title on the wall. So art of the logos. And again, it's not a blame game. There's causes for that, which is important because if we want to extend the art of the logos to benefit people interested in philosophy, we can do that. Hey, by the way, what about this? What about that? What about this text? What about the language? What about the human history? All of these things. So that's what we're doing. We're learning the art of the logos so we can benefit ourselves, and we are also learning what are the different ways of apprehending so we can go beyond trust to dianoia understanding, and even that's a stepping stone to the contemplation or the direct experience of it, which requires us to separate our soul from the body, which Socrates says that's death, by the way. That's why philosophy is the art and practice of death and dying and being dead. That's a funny definition for philosophy. And by the way, if we are separating our soul from the body, we better have a good reason to trust or understand that our soul isn't going to blow away into the wind if it's not encased within the hard shell of our body. That it is immortal and indestructible. That's what we're doing. Gaining good reasons to think that and trust that, while also learning how to reason for ourselves and learn the art of the logos, which is necessary to reach that experience, reach being, and maybe even go beyond that. So, this is Cebes. So, Simmias and Cebes are the two dudes with Socrates. Phaedo is there, of course. He's our narrator. And there are some other people. But these are the two main people who are talking to Socrates. Balloons. Cebes brought in the idea of the last jacket argument. Even if our soul is stronger than our body, because our body changes form many times in our life. The same way we change our clothes and outlive our jackets many times in our life. But maybe we don't outlive our last jacket. Even if there's reincarnation, maybe every incarnation wears down the soul till eventually this could be our last incarnation. So it's smart to fear that this death might be our last, unless we can prove, and Socrates polished up his question nicely. This is what we've been doing. We have a question, we polish it up, we find a way of phrasing it nicely, getting the essence to it as simply as possible. We have to prove, know and prove, there's a duad, that the soul is immortal and indestructible. We've already gone through the immortal argument, what we just mentioned just then, to do with bringing in the opposites like three. And now we're on whether or not it's indestructible. Now, the argument that was presented was, well, of course, the soul has to be indestructible because we've already proven it to be immortal. And immortal means, let's get the exact word so we're not interpreting. Immortal means everlasting. Immortal means everlasting. And if the everlasting accepts destruction, then nothing could escape destruction. So it's kind of an arguing for the opposite. So it's what happens if there was destruction for the soul, which is part of our way of reasoning. You create a hypothesis, you say what is, and you do the 4 steps that follow, and you do what isn't. The 4 steps that follow if being doesn't exist, if philosophy doesn't exist, if the art of the logos is not taught at schools, what follows? Thumbs up. So hey, if the soul was destroyed, what would follow? Well, we've already seen it must be immortal, which means everlasting. And if the everlasting could be destroyed, then everything can be destroyed. Then nothing would be immortal. Nothing would be indestructible. Makes sense? Was it sufficient though? Are we happy with it? Yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking, well, maybe everything is destroyed eventually. Doesn't seem sufficient to me. Simius, it was, his conclusion was, let's bring it up. Here it is here. Seebees' conclusion. How could anything at all not accept destruction, if the immortal, being everlasting, accepts destruction? And then his reasoning was every human being would agree to that. So what is he using for his standard? What every human being would agree to? Is that what we want? And his conclusion is, I no longer have anything else to say against it, nor can I in any way distrust the logos. So he's saying, well, I won't distrust. So he's still at the level of trust. Socrates went to a lot of effort to say, we need to go beyond trust. So, interesting. What do we do now? Well, thankfully, Socrates kept going. Socrates invited Simius and he said, hey, by the way, Simius, do you have anything to say? Well, I don't distrust the logos, but because of my low valuation of human frailty, I know how humans can be frail, I still have some distrust on behalf of myself. So I'm not there yet. Thank goodness that he's in the room too. Socrates brings in the idea of sufficient. We have to thoroughly discuss selves in a sufficient way. So wasn't really sufficient, maybe. Okay, we have to require a clearer examination for it to be trustworthy. For us to trust this, we need something more. It has to be trustworthy. We can't just trust it because it's Socrates saying it. Or because, what does he say? Or because everybody else does it? What's the expression he uses? Or because every human being would agree to that. Does that make it trustworthy? Or have lots of people been wrong about things? All right, and by the way, Socrates goes one step further. Not only do we require clear examination for it to be trustworthy, a standard for trust, Socrates has been saying he trusts he's going to a good place after he dies. He trusts. He trusts he's done his work here. He trusts he's completed his cycles of reincarnation, we would say. But there's a standard of trustworthiness that we need to reach. Okay, we have to thoroughly discuss selves. That's a puzzle. What exactly would that be? Is that some sort of paradigm as part of the art? It has to be sufficient. There has to be some standard for whether or not we've been convinced, which is one of our questions. What makes that sufficient? And by the way, if you do follow the logos, as far as a human is able, that's a puzzle. Are there superhumans or higher dimensional entities or wherever we go when we can separate the soul from the body that can follow the logos better? At any rate, as far as we are able, that's a kind of standard of excellence. If we follow the logos as far as a human is able to do so, and if this self becomes clear, you will seek no further. Now, of course, we know the word altos has 3 levels of meaning. That's one of the ways of unpacking the text and discovering questions. If this self becomes clear, the first reading is the particular. The particular logos. If the self what's the particular argument? Whether or not the soul is indestructible. Okay? Now, it has the honorific, which is why it's in a different color and it's got a capital S. A translator reminding us, hey, by the way, altos has this meaning. Here it is. Honorific, if the self of the logos, and that's what we talked about at the end of last episode. What's the implication? That if we reach the selfhood in being, the aspect of being, the aspect of self-ousia in the realm of being, of the logos, what does it mean that we will seek no further? And we push the implications of that question using our reflection on hierarchy, because we are looking for causal. What's more causal? Because Socrates is also in his second search for causes. Where's my pen? Socrates is in his second search for causes. So one of the questions is, how is Socrates able to get to this kind of level of functioning? We're looking for what's more causal, because physical things is a cause. Socrates couldn't be sitting if he didn't have bones, but his mind is more causal. If he had a thought in his mind that it would be more just to be elsewhere, his bones would be elsewhere. So justice is up there as more causal, because his mind is relating it against his understanding or his paradigm or his level of art in apprehending justice. Okay, so we applied that to our question. What does it mean that we would seek no further upon reaching the self-logos, the honorific reading of altos? Well, maybe logos, in terms of the hierarchy, what's more causal or primary or has a greater scope, or the word is hyparxis, the top of that pyramid. If beauty is the first thing you recognize once you experience the realm of being, maybe you can recognize it's perfectly ordered and it has to be the way there is. And you've got this sense of justice. It needs to be the way that it is, and it's just for it to be this way. Maybe you recognize a level of goodness to the way everything is in this realm of being. Different levels of depth. We can ask the question, what's more causal? Can you have beauty without justice? If so, then beauty would be lower. Wait. Yeah. Can you have justice without beauty? No, well, you can't. Justice necessarily implies beauty and is the cause of beauty. Maybe. These are questions that will come up for us in wanting to hierarchically arrange all of those things which we stamp the seal, that which absolutely is. So our reflection last time is, how can we use this reflection on causes to have that hierarchical arrangement which is needed for dianoia, understanding, and needed for art, because we have to climb that ladder if we want to benefit, to reach what's most good or most highest. That's what benefit means. We need to know the pattern to have an understanding of it. There needs to be a paradigm at the top that's causing this pattern, and we need to be able to use it to climb for it to have benefit. All of those things are in our working hypothesis of what the heck makes art art. We don't know. It's still a question. It's still a question. Art? Art? Is our question. Art? We seek no further upon reaching the self logos. Does that mean that there's nowhere to go once we reach the self logos? In other words, it's the highest aspect possibly. Okay, now, of course, there's 3 levels of reading. There's the particular logos, that our soul is indestructible, and therefore we would seek no further because we have sufficiently answered whether or not our soul is indestructible, and therefore we can trust it. There's the honorific. If we reach the self logos, why would we seek no further? Is that a kind of end to our quest? Is that a finishing flag in terms of destiny? And there's a third reading, which is a lovely triad, of course, the self triad, the one self. If we reached the self through following the logos, is that a kind of definition for destiny? And therefore we would seek no further. And has this got something to do with the proper philosophy, our proper activity of philosophy, and our purpose while we're here? And maybe purpose of all living beings. That's a nice one. That seems really beautiful. Is it sufficient? Not perfectly. Is it beautiful? Absolutely. Is it necessary? Could be. Is it sufficient? Not yet. Okay, is it discordant with everything we're learning? The idea that reaching the self by following the logos is the end or the goal of destiny. It's not discordant with anything we've been learning. Is it harmonious with what we've been learning? Well, yeah, kind of is, hey, especially considering Socrates is saying the most important thing we can do is to learn the art of the logos. Wowzers. Wow. So this is the style of thinking he's teaching us. Create a hypothesis. We just did. Could this be a reading of this question? Follow the consequences. Is it discordant or harmonious? Well, yeah, it's kind of harmonious. I can't see any discord yet. Is there a beauty in it? Oh, yeah, it does sound really nice. And it fits beautifully into the sentence. The 3 readings, oof, that was really beautiful. The particular, the honorific in terms of the highest aspect of being, and maybe our ultimate, seeking no further. Really beautiful. Necessary? Is it necessary? So beauty, justice, or is it necessary? No, I can't really see that yet. Is it sufficient? No. But we're definitely carrying it in our inventory of ifs. A hypothesis. Maybe that's a good way of understanding our destiny, our purpose, which is important because last time we talked about, it's important to carry the causes with you. If you're dropping your cause, you are rudderless and you can be manipulated, and it's a way of losing your goal. Like, why are you here? You walk into a kitchen. Why did I walk into the kitchen? I don't know. I forgot the cause for me coming into the kitchen. How can you reach your goal if you forget the cause or reason? Okay, notice reason is a cause that isn't physical, but you can, like, this is the jump that we have to make from physical causes. Why did I walk into the kitchen? What's the cause of that? Oh, my left leg moved and then my right leg moved and then my left leg moved and my heart pumped blood and my lungs breathed in oxygen. Yes, that is a cause and it's needed. That's not really a good answer. In other words, it's not one of the highest causes that we're after, hierarchically or most causal. But then when we introduce the mind, which is why Socrates liked Anaxagoras, he talked about mind. That's why I liked a physics teacher that I had in high school, because he talked about mind only a little bit. Same thing with Anaxagoras. He mentioned it briefly with reference to Einsteinian relativity, and I was excited and I wanted to take physics at college, but then I realized that was pretty much the only time he mentioned mind, and I was very disappointed. The same way Socrates recognized the same thing with Anaxagoras and was very disappointed. He went back down again. He didn't go up because, hey, Socrates says, hey, causes is one thing, but the causes of causes is another, or the conditions of causes. Wow. So he recognized you need to go even further. So what's the cause for you walking into the kitchen? Physical? Yeah, sure. But what was your mind doing? Bring in the mind. Bring in being. Now we have reason. So one way of understanding the reason is, what's reason? A cause related to mind. What's the reason? What was the cause for coming into the kitchen, existing in your mind? Oh, I wanted some cake. Lovely, lovely cake.
Wow.
If you drop your cause, how can you reach your goal? If you forget that cause in mind, that you want a cake, will you have a success or failure? Failure. You'll get no cake.
Wow.
No cake.
What?
No cake.
What?
No cake for you. How bad is that? So we've got to hold on to our causes. So if we discover, and by the way, this cause is more primary, which can maybe take with you the other causes. If you hold on, I need some cake, the other causes, your left and right movement of feet, will follow. So we want the highest cause, and that should be our focus. A singular focus. So there's our singular focus needed for virtues that can harmonize all of the other causes. There's another aspect of virtues we've learned. Virtues are kind of harmony. That's why our soul can't be a byproduct. You can't say the soul is a harmony from the physical body, because virtues are harmony. Remember that argument? And if virtues are harmony, vice must be disharmony. So if the soul is harmony because we're a byproduct of our physical, an emergent harmony, then you can't bring with it its opposite, disharmony. And if vice is defined as disharmony, then as soon as you bring in vice, we would have no soul. Therefore, there is no such thing as vice, because you can't have vice in a soul. That's impossible. So there's no difference between virtue and vice. This is the irrationality or the discord that would follow in the hypothesis that our soul is harmony. That was Simmias's argument. So now we can look at Simmias's argument with new eyes. Before, we just went through the steps. If the soul is harmony and virtue is harmony, that means the opposite of virtue is vice, which is disharmony. You can't have harmony and disharmony at the same time because they're opposites. Therefore, you can't have vice in the soul. Therefore, either there's no such thing as vice and there's no difference between virtue and vice, or there's no such thing as a soul. That doesn't make sense because we know there are bad things, bad habits. But now we've gone a little bit further, we can go back, ousia, self-reflecting, and use what we've learned to understand that. By the way, that's a kind of hypothesis, an if statement, using the loftiest vision of Simmias, which happens to be from his cultural and religious mythology, by the way. Interesting, because mythology is a key theme in this text. And we push the consequences or implications. How does it relate to others, others to others? And that other is virtue and vice. And was it harmonious or discordant? It was discordant. So therefore, it doesn't work. So now we can understand what we went through this new lens of how to think, how to do dianoia, how to reason. Also, we can use our new seeing of bringing in the opposites from this, why can 3 not be even? Or why can the soul not die? Because you bring in its opposite, okay? So the soul brings life. Life can't exist with the opposite. Therefore, the soul can't exist at the same time as death. It can't die. So we can use this. You can't bring in death. So it's deathless, or it's undeath, immortal. So we can use this to understand this previous argument of harmony. Why? Virtue brings in harmony. Therefore, you can't have virtue and disharmony, because disharmony is the opposites. Disharmony is the opposites of harmony. Therefore, if you bring in vice, virtue would run away or leave, harmony would leave. Therefore, if the soul was harmony, it would leave too. Because the soul, if the soul is harmony, it can't sustain its opposite. Disharmony. Therefore, if you bring in disharmony, you couldn't have a soul. Therefore, there's no such thing. You can't have a disharmonious or vice version of soul. But we know that's impossible, so that's the hypothesis of what follows. Is it discordant? Yes. If it's discordant, we have to replace that hypothesis with a better working hypothesis. We upgrade. We're climbing a ladder. So we can use what we just learned about this argument from the immortality of the soul to better understand what we went through with Simmias in his harmony idea of the soul. And of course, we don't feel bad about it. We don't get attached to it. As Socrates says in a different text, hey, don't feel like you have to defend your babies. If it's wrong, fine. Change your mind. What does that mean? Use a different, from that experience, you've learned something. So you've got a greater or more lofty vision and loftier understanding. Use that to create a new working hypothesis. And so on and so on. You'll keep polishing up your hypotheses the same way we keep polishing up our questions. The way Socrates polished up Sebe's questions, made it nice. It doesn't have to be perfect. It won't be perfect because you can keep polishing it up. So what, is there no end? Well, hang on a second. That's dianoia. You can say, well, one definition of dianoia is a continual polishing of your hypotheses, of your ifs, your what if universe. And you can mythologize your ifs in your art. Create a Spider-Man what if fan fiction. What if this happened? Which is just taking all of the things that you've seen in your hypothesis that you've polished up nicely and representing them through metaphor and story and stuff. Or if you're a songwriter in songs, if you're a playwright, make a play about it. Fun. And if I was a betting man, I bet those kinds of stories, plays, works of art will be more interesting and meaningful and cool than those that don't follow Socrates' guide. That's my if. If you use this in your art, I think it will kick ass. I might be wrong, but that's the hypothesis I'm carrying. Now we can recognize that while dianoia is a hypothesis, it is also the method through which we purify ourselves. So we're not just polishing up our hypothesis, we're polishing up our souls, because that's the gateway to verification of our hypothesis in the experience of nous. So while this can continuously be polished and improved on, don't be precious. Change your mind, learn. Is it sufficient? Can you come up with a loftier hypothesis? Talk with your friends. over coffee. Hey, if you're going to talk over coffee, why not talk about, hey, what's your loftiest hypothesis about the soul? That will be fun. It'll be interesting. Also, it'll bring in a focus. It will be in line with your cause. If you're holding on to your cause too, your reason for being here, to master the art of the logos, says Socrates. Because you're using it, it's an art. It's something apprehendable in the realm of being, the soul. And it can therefore take you from that focused concentration in your question or your conversation with your buddy over coffee, that's called meditation, sustained focus, to contemplation, where you can leap from a nicely polished dianoia hypothesis to direct experience. That's called nous. That's the kind of initiation if you've gone through there by following the logos. And it wasn't through drugs or breathing or meditation, or this is a meditation, but so if Socrates said, hey, by the way, if you reach the self by following the logos, you will seek no further. Can we bring that in? Well, yeah. If we are polishing our hypothesis and sharing it in our conversation, and we reach the self of it, we would seek no further. We don't have to keep polishing it up. It served its purpose. I mean, you probably will. You'll probably find more refined ways, and it's because it's fun, and we're talking anyway, so why not talk about this? But it served its purpose. You will seek no further. You've made the jump. That's called contemplation. But if you've made the jump some other way, luck, in the middle of a festival, maybe you got lucky. Sometimes in a big display of effort, like on the sports field, sometimes people make that jump out of their body. Curiously, they often perform max excellence, which is really interesting and cool and fun. But you would continue to seek further because you want to understand, how did I do that? And if I played the best football I've ever played, how do I get back there? Because I don't want to play anything less than that. You would continue to seek further. But if you made that through following the logos, you would have an understanding. With you, there's your if. Therefore, if you can climb that ladder to greater health or excellence through understanding and experience, through dianoia and nous, you have what necessary things for art. You can artfully get there. And by the way, when you can artfully get there with understanding and direct experience, it can be fun. Oh my God, it's so fun. You're not afraid of, oh, well, will I be in the zone tonight? You know, basketball players, the career of, who is he? One of the Splash Brothers, Steph Curry and, who's the other Splash Brother? Chat? Who's Steph Curry's offsider? Just got traded, I think. One of the greatest three-point shooters in the NBA, but he's famously streaky. Sometimes he'll shoot 0, he'll have 10 shots, which is a lot, and he'll hit none of them. Famously, in his last playoff game, he shot 0 from 11. Paid millions of dollars to get 0 3-point baskets after taking 11 shots and losing the playoff. Why is he paid millions? Don't know the guy. Because sometimes he's in the zone where he will take 11 shots and hit 11, and then all of a sudden there's no way the team can be beaten. If you're watching this on YouTube, share it in the chat. People in the Twitch chat don't like sports ball. So his career is famously, will I be in the zone or will I not? That can be very stressful and have, not as fun. It's fun when you're in the zone, by the way. But if it's an art, when you have it, when it's yours, How much fun would that be? And if Socrates has the art of the logos, maybe that's why he wanders around all the time, has fun talking to everyone, talking to lawyers and judges and generals, but also talking to housewives and blacksmiths and sexy boys like Alcibiades, handsome men. So maybe this is one understanding of why we would seek no further if we make that jump. But also we're learning how to think. And of course, the reason why we care about all this is because we need the art of the logos. Second cause, because we're also in the text, we ask, how do we search for causes? And finally, the other cause we're holding on to is to prove that the soul is immortal and indestructible. So those are the causes we have. And let's see if Simmias seeks a better if hypothesis, polishes up our if a little bit more nicely and more sufficiently for us than Cebes did. Let's jump in and read. So, Cebes said, I don't distrust. That's pretty low standard. And by the way, all humans would agree with this idea that, of course, immortal can't be destructive, can't die because everything would die. Yeah. Simmias, thank goodness, isn't happy. I still have some distrust because I have a low valuation of human frailty. Humans are frail. So maybe our soul is frail. So we require clearer examination for this understanding to be trustworthy to us. If we thoroughly discuss ourselves in a sufficient way, and we follow the logos as far as the human is able, I hope you are following as far as you are able, because you are a human. Stay with it. If you're still with it, good for you. And a round of applause for getting this far. Because as CB said, most people would be content with whatever. Every human being would agree with that, and then they'd move on and do something more interesting to them. So if you've gotten this far, good for you. You are holding on to the most important cause as Socrates is outlining. So yeah, another round of applause for you. And if we reach this self by following the logos, we would seek no further. Interesting. Let's keep going. Simmias says, you speak the truth. Okay. Does Simmias know the truth? Or was that sufficient for him? Socrates, but it is indeed just. Okay. This is our Dick Chaos, which is Dick Chaos is the Greek word for justice. To bear in mind the following. O virile ones. Now, virile, we've seen from the puzzle earlier in the text, is the adjective assigned to the virtue of courage. If you hold on to the cause to master the art of the logos, polish your hypotheses, polish your questions, because that's dianoia, which is a gateway to nous in being. So the art of the logos directed towards being. If you hold on to that, in all the ups and downs, pleasures and pains in life, that's courage. And what kind of a person will you be? A virile one. Rah. So it's the kind of vitality, a kind of strength, okay, that would come with you, which is needed because we're doing activity. We need to be focused on the right activity or desire. There's our temperance, but we need some power so that we can master the art of the logos. That sounds like a triad. So we want a kind of activity, but we need power for that activity so we can reach our goal. Whoops. I accidentally flew out into space. All right, so what activity? Well, if it's directed towards the mastering the art of the logos, holding on to our cause, our purpose, then we can say, hang on a second, that sounds like sound-mindedness. Or temperance is that virtue. What desire are we motivated by? And what's our goal? Master the art of the logos. Which sounds like a good way of, well, sounds very much like wisdom. That virtue of wisdom, to be guided by the logos. So there's our activity and goal. Therefore, when you have two pieces of a triangle in your skill tree, you can rub them together and gain insight. So you can gain a more polished hypothesis but you can also rub them together to give birth to a question. So if we've seen these, we could say, hang on a second, what would this be? Well, in this triangle, we would call it courage. Say courage. But from this triangle, because this relates to that, that relates to that, we can rub these two sticks together. That's why we have the skill tree. Lots of branches, lots of sticks to rub against each other. So what's courage? Be a kind of power. Oh, so courage is a kind of power that we have. And this could be what Socrates is calling virility. Kind of life, a kind of strength, kind of power associated with courage. So now we can understand this word virility. Notice, it's a working hypothesis. Maybe we'll come up with a better idea of what's meant with virility. Is it harmonious? Well, yeah, we used it before. Remember where he said, we have four virtues: justice, being, virility, and temperance, that change into justice, phronesis, virility, and temperance. That's the initiation. Hang on a second, being and virility aren't virtues. Or maybe wisdom is somehow related to being. The same way virility is somehow related to courage. Does that work? Is it harmonious with the other things that we've seen? Absolutely. Virility is related to courage in this hypothesis. This is a little example of how we can hold the hypotheses, polish up the hypotheses, and also look for key terms and patterns in our skill trees to discover the two big things we're interested in: questions and hypotheses. We polish up both and carry both with us.
Wow!
So now we're reading the text as an active participant. Oh, virile ones, what's he saying? Hey, have courage. Use courage. What's courage? A kind of strength or life force or power associated with following the logos. Oh, wait a minute, what are we doing? Following the logos. It fits. Follow the logos. What's that called? Courage. Now we have a better understanding of what courage is. Following the logos. until the self becomes clear and we seek no further. Interesting. And what's the power associated with doing that? Virility. Okay. But also, we have a nice understanding of what virility is. Also, we have to do part B. That's part of having a hypothesis. What if it is? What if it isn't? Okay, so what if following the logos until you reach the self and you seek your final goal and you reach your final goal? What if that was not your understanding? What if you didn't follow the logos, didn't have the logos to understand virility? Do we have people talking about what it means to be virile and powerful and strong and have life force and have energy, but do not have the art of the logos, are not holding on to their ultimate cause and reaching there through following the logos? Do those people exist nowadays? Yeah. What do they call virility? Being alpha. What do they say it means to be virile? To be sexist. To be a jerk to women. That's what it means to be alpha. By the way, why are they doing it? Because they want to sell an easy hierarchy. You're a man, so that makes you better than women. You don't have to actually develop an art to climb a hierarchy. You're just naturally at the top, which is what makes religion appealing. You're picked by God. Don't have to do anything. Why? So you can give me your money. There's people who sell virility as alpha, scamming people for money. Yep, that's what they do. Famously, many of them don't believe they're crap. They realize they get audience captured, we call it. Also, what are they interested in? Socrates say, if you don't follow the art of the logos, you will be a lover of riches, thumbs up, or a lover of fame. So they also do it, sell this alpha, virility, manliness, crap to get famous as well as rich. Yup. So this hypothesis, harmonious with all of the other implications, both if it is and if it isn't? Yep. It's a nice working hypothesis. That true virility is the adjective described to being in a state of the virtue of courage, following the logos as far as you are able until you reach the self. Seeking the art of the logos. What Socrates says is the most important thing and what he's trying to leave behind. Both harmonious with what it is and harmonious with what we see in our world, people who don't have Socrates teaching in their back pocket, but teach what virility is. So that's another example of using this way of thinking Socrates is helping us to learn. Okay, it's just. So this, by the way, justice. So 2 virtues he's calling in. Justice is one of the 4 virtues. Oh, courageous ones, that if the soul is immortal. So he's like starting in an interesting way, right? What we're doing is going to be just and requires courage. So it might not be a cakewalk, but you're on the right track. So cheering them on, kind of. Gives them a thumbs up. If the soul is immortal, she truly needs our care, not only for the sake of this time, which we call life, but for the sake of all time. Wow.
Come on, man.
Wow. Okay, that crazy fanfare drop is a bit loud. I'm just going to turn that one down. But yeah, all time, that's a big one. What we're doing here is care. Our soul cares for us not just here, but in eternity. So hey, we're here for a short amount of time relative to eternity. And if we need to care for ourselves in both places, stakes are high for whatever Socrates is going to say next. So setting the stakes. You got to care for yourself. Also for all time. And that the danger should now truly appear to be terrible. Okay, again, stakes. If one does not care for self. For if on the one hand, death were an escape from all, then dying would be a windfall. Windfall. For the wicked, so we can, I think. For the wicked. To be freed from the body and at the same time from the wickedness, or the word is vice. So we see kakao here, which means bad relative to the context. So what's bad relative to the nurturing of the soul? You could call it wickedness, but I don't know, it feels like there might be some cultural or religious mythology seeping into that translation, maybe, which is what we have to do. We have to judge based on what's there. Kakos, kakios, which just means bad relative to the context. So we are realizing that the training of the soul that has an impact both in this life and the next is the training of virtue or vice. We can recognize the word wickedness is kind of tied with the idea of maybe wicked, like maybe innate badness. You punish someone who's wicked, whereas someone who's learning, you nurture. So maybe there is some interpretation from the translator, maybe a hypothesis, don't know. And we could hypothesize, as we are doing with Simius and Cebes, what influences them, and their reaction to logos is their mythology, their societal and religious mythology, to do with reincarnation and the nature of the soul and so forth. So maybe our translator has a cultural or religious background where people are told that they're wicked if they're bad. Could that be a Catholic thing, maybe? I don't know. Sounds Catholic to me. So I'm going to cross out wickedness, but we can see, well, the right reading would be vice. It's not wrong. The translator is not wicked. But maybe vice fits better. This isn't, wicked was not sufficient for me. See what we do? We roll it on. Like when we have an insight, like when I'm having fun with this, I'm making funny faces because it's fun. It's kind of like a joke, like a pun. Only puns are the imitation of this. We just saw something about thinking through creating a hypothesis and judging whether or not it's sufficient. And not being precious, holding on to your babies, your opinions. Socrates said, don't be precious. Just upgrade your hypotheses. Create a new vision, more lofty, and polish it up nicely. We just saw that, and then when we got to this stage of wickedness, I used it. Ta-da! I started by saying, I don't like it. But no, I can use what I just saw. It wasn't sufficient for me. I could polish that word up a little bit more nicely. So that's kind of like a pun. Pun is one thing from this idea connected to this idea, but we cringe because there's no meaning there. Like, what's a pun? Let me find an example of a pun. So a pun would be what we just did, a kind of ousia reflection and using our learning to turn it about upon itself straight away. using what's meaningful about learning in the logos. So that's the working hypothesis of what I just did. Now, I also have to do, what if it isn't there? What if we take out meaning in the logos? We get a pun. Pun examples. Okay. The butcher didn't take the risk as the stakes were too high. Okay, so it takes what we saw of the first part, the butcher, and it relates it to the second part, the stakes being too high, but it's related through something that isn't really related. That's why we laugh. Like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing, but I laugh because it's not really there. It's not actually stakes. Making macaroni cheese was great fun. Okay, the first part, making macaroni, related to the second part, how fun it was. And the word that ties them together isn't the logos, isn't applying a learning to do the second thing better, a development that benefits you up the hierarchy. It's a play on words. Great, like you grate the cheese. And that's why we cringe. The person giving the pun pats himself on the back. Why? What's the principle that makes someone giving a pun feel wise? This, ousia, using the learning from what one thing is, rolling it on into the next thing and applying it there to do better. Learning. Why do people cringe and not go, wow, that was profound? Because it's fake. It misses the logos. It's not actually a rolling on. It's just a rolling on of a play on words. The butcher rolls onto its steaks. That's why we cringe, because we feel like they've betrayed some fundamental principle of reality. That principle is what we want to do and not betray. And that's ousia. And that's what Socrates is doing. He is taking what we learn in one thing and rolling it on to the next. He's already determined what actual virility is. He used that word earlier. And what it isn't, the vice version of courage. And now he's taking that with us and rolling it on so we can use it. We can build upon our development. What's that? Climbing a ladder. You take this step and you build. You'll take your learning here and you build, you roll it on. That's necessary for learning. Not only that, if we look at the structure of learning, the dialectic, self is to self is the first category, that's definition. You've just defined this thing, define it, roll it on. This thing you've just defined here, how does that relate to another thing? How does the logos relate to art? Let's say. So logos is the self, define it. Now, how does it relate to art? Now, this thing, art, that has now been related to, so you've developed, you've polished up your idea of art. How does that relate to other things, other subjects, other people? And now how do these people, having been related to through an art that has itself been related to through the logos, notice each part rolls on to the next. How does that roll on to relate back to the logos itself? All the way back to the self-referring. So this is the rolling on. If you can see it, do it. You could call it stitching together the text, is another expression I've heard. So here, we just saw, okay, it was not, the understanding of that argument was not sufficient for Simius, even though it was for Cebes. I came to this word and I don't like it. And I could have just moved on. But I rolled on what we just saw. Oh, this word wickedness was not sufficient. as it was for the translator. Translator was happy like Seabees. I'm more like Simius. Okay. And then also, hang on a second, was he a wicked translator? No. Again, roll it on. What did we just see? Why is it not sufficient? Because wickedness implies some bad by nature and not missing the mark. Evil, you're a wicked child, you're going to go to hell. Or you're a wicked child, you deserve no cake today. No cake. Or you deserve a smack. Or bad grades. Punishment. And we roll on what we saw from our idea. People are not made better through introducing the opposite. Therefore, punishment doesn't work. So we roll that on too. We're developing, we're learning. So we don't say that. So I'm not calling the translator wicked. It just was not sufficient for me. And if I had an art, maybe I could ask him questions if he was open and interested. That could open him up to a more sufficient, or seeing that it wasn't sufficient for him. So he could polish up his translation, his hypothesis. So we rolled on the idea of not blaming or punishing him. But also, the definition itself, wicked. Hey, we just saw it. It's not wicked, it's vice. So therefore, we won't call this translation wicked. Just missing the mark, or not sufficient. Taking what we learn and rolling it on. Which is very similar to what we just did with our triads. You take what we learned here, we learned this triad of activity, power, and goal or being, and we rubbed it against this one. We rolled it on, we rubbed them together to discover a question. Oh, what would this one be? And a hypothesis. So there's our question. Let's give it a different color. Our question we discovered comes to light for us, and a hypothesis came to light for us. Rolling it on. So what did we just do? Seemed significant. So a question just came to light. What the heck just happened? There was a kind of symmetry, a kind of flow, a kind of repetition, aspects of beauty. That's enough for a question. What the heck happened? We created a hypothesis. It's a kind of rolling on of ousia that's inherent in the dialectic and necessary for learning, therefore needed to climb the ladder, therefore something needed for development and art. That was the hypothesis. Okay, is that concordant? Yeah, it's concordant with all those things. But also, what if it isn't? We have to do that. So what if we take out the idea of the art of the logos? And learning, and benefit, and genuine ousia? We get a pun. Rolling on from one thing into the next thing through wordplay, where you're not actually learning anything about what it means to be a butcher because the stakes were so high. You're not actually following the logos. There's no actual art in anyone who uses a pun. But they feel like they're clever and they pat themselves on the back because they're imitating the art. They're imitating our hypothesis. And everyone else cringes because they're not made better. Like, why did I waste a minute of my time listening to that nonsense? I thought you were going to say something meaningful, but you've given me a dad pun. Ugh. I've been betrayed. And they're like, look how clever I am. So is it consistent both, or harmonious both if it is and isn't? Yep. If it is, we have logos, meaning, learning, dialectic, and ousia, all these lovely words. And if it isn't, pun. So we've polished up both our understanding of learning and what we're looking for. Why? Because we're holding on to our cause. We want to understand how to master the logos, the art of the logos. So we've seen more about that, which is good. This one here, logos, learning, dialectic, ousia, that's all things that are consistent, harmonious with our cause, but also we've seen something about what it isn't too. Puns. That was a fun thing to see. So, if death were an escape from all, very significant, it would be a windfall. Because the people who are practiced in vice would be freed from the body and at the same time from the vice of themselves and of their soul. But since she has now come to light as being immortal, there will be no escape from self nor from vice. So in other words, do it again. What can we call that? Well, the very first words of his arguments was, it is indeed just. Is this a kind of justice? Can we roll on not just our learning, but the logos itself, the structure of the words itself, the same way the opening of the text, the first word of the text was significant. We can roll it on. And by the way, when we get to the end, we can go back and we'll probably see the meaning of the opening of the text in a more significant way. Likewise, when we read this, it is just to bear in mind. We said, what does that mean? Oh, he's encouraging people. It's just. We've talked about justice. Be just. You can do it. And you need courage to do it, but you can be virile. But now we've gone on a little bit further. Take it back to the start. Ousia, reflect. Now this idea of starting with the idea of justice is more meaningful to us. It's less punny. No, that's not the word. It's not a pun, but it's the opposite of a pun. It actually has a significance. The start rolled on to the end. And good writing, foreshadowing. We call that in writing. If you see a gun in the first act, it has to go off in the third act. That kind of principle in screenwriting. Okay, so if your soul was destroyed, it would be a windfall for the wicked. That would be unjust. Is the work we are putting in to piece the puzzles together. So there would be no escape from self or from vice. So here he goes. He gets there. Except the salvation of becoming as good and phronesis as possible. Okay, so we have, again, our translator uses the word mindful because that's to talk to a general audience, but we see phronesis. But we know that's a key word that is being used in different ways through the text. We've seen phronesis as the ultimate virtue, as we seek truth in phronesis. Now he's saying good in phronesis. So there's a little variation on the theme. Normally it's we seek truth in phronesis. So is this an upgrade? Or is good a better way of understanding truth? But he's tying good and phronesis together. We've also seen earlier, he talked about those who are not with the logos and are lovers of debating and anti-logos and contention, debate bros. They don't even know whether the conversation is worth having because they lack something called phronotousia, phronesis and ousia, a state of the self that can be a kind of guide, an intuitive guide to whether or not it's worth even talking about this subject, whether it's even worth debating gender-neutral bathrooms. Of course it's bloody not. They've got no guide. because they're just lovers of debate. They're not developing their soul, getting a virtuous soul, which brings forth heightened states of being and states of mind, including a guide for the logos, which is curious. So this is another example of the word phronesis mixed with another word. So we copy it, and we recognize there's a puzzle to be solved here, possibly. So we copy it. God damn it, I was on mute. So what I was saying was it's a suffix which goes on the end of the word to make it the superlative or the best. So delios tetos means the clearest. Sophros tatos is the wisest. Phronimotatin is the most phronesis. So, yeah, and our translator got there. So, mindful as possible, phronesis as possible, or the most phronesis. So it's our goal. There is no salvation for us unless we become as good and phronesis as possible. We want to be the phronesis dotatin. For the soul goes to the realm of the invisible, possessing nothing else except her education and nature. Here's our Paideos. P-A-I-D-E-A-E-I-A-S. Paideos. Pi Day. Every day is Pi Day for philosophers. Yum, 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 yum. Paideos is the kind of spiritual education that, well, I guess, yeah, we have our definition for that word that we've been using. Paideos, we can bring with her. The soul goes to the realm of the invisible. This is a huge insight. So, you know, if you've been following along this long, here's a little bit of a gold nugget from Socrates, a bit of a truth bomb. You go into the realm of the invisible, possessing nothing else except Paideos, education, and nurture. So this is our, what is our Paideos? But rolling on what we're learning, some learning of the art of the logos. We can take it with us. Good. Which is good because last time we hypothesized that if we reach the end of our seeking by reaching the logos, so we've developed an art of the logos because we've reached it both through understanding and climbing the ladder. So there's the art. And if it's knowable in the realm of being, then is it a hyparxis? Where's our notes? Okay, we didn't draw notes on this. We had, let's do it now. We had a hypothesis that this means that, you know, if the logos is the top of the highest aspect or eideos of being, that has the word hyparxis, which is important because we've already used hyparxis to talk about the nature of the soul and the nature of being. Then that also has an existence into the next realm. And so on. So it should be more like this. So if the logos is the aspect of being, so if we say this is being, then maybe the logos can come with us to that which is beyond being. The art of the logos. Now, Socrates is saying this also is, we bring with us our paideia and our nurture. So we bring with us from this realm of being, of becoming, let's say blue. From the realm of becoming, where we're here as humans, we take with us into the realm of being our paideia, which is our working hypothesis so far is the art of the logos. Art of the logos. And our nurture, which we are learning is the virtues. So maybe the art of the logos is both. It's at least here, and our hypothesis from before was if it is the highest aspect or causal of all the other beings, maybe it is a kind of paideia that we take with us, not just into the realm of being or after our death if we don't reincarnate, but maybe also we continue to develop that or use that. And as Socrates says, engage with better men and gods as we find here, do philosophy without the annoying interruptions of our physical body flooding in, and therefore further perfect the art of the logos and take it with us to this realm here, which is a question. What the heck is this realm? If there's activities to do here, and do we bring the art of the logos with us? There's another question. And our hypothesis is maybe it does because of what we're reading and what we're putting together now. So we've got a lovely question and a lovely hypothesis. So there's no escape. Your nurture is important. Practicing the virtues at all time is important. Our education, developing the art of the logos is important. And by the way, you can integrate that into a state called phronesis, which we are hypothesizing is because it's a kind of virtue that we do the other virtues for, it's an upgrading of our nature. But it requires noesis, it requires the experience, so it requires the experience of the logos in being, in this realm here. Thanks for the claps in chat. So maybe another working hypothesis is, could phronesis, because he says become as good and as mindful as possible. I love that word, by the way. Phronimotatin. You need to be phronimotatin. Throw more potatoes in. When someone says, do you have enough potatoes in your stew? You'll say, no, throw some more potatoes in. Phronimotatin. That was a weak one. All right. Phronimotatin is the most phronesis, and maybe it's a way hypothesis of combining our education of the art of the logos with our practice and nurturing of the virtues that he encouraged us to do. Just and courageous. Maybe. Not sufficient, but working hypothesis, a working title. Okay. The soul goes into the realm of the invisible, possessing nothing except your art of the logos, maybe, education, paideia, and your nurture, which is pretty cut and dry, virtues, right? So, can't take your Bugattis. Can't take your Bugattis with you. Can't take your money with you. Can't take your fame with you. Interesting. What does this do for all of the people who are not lovers of Phronesis. Lovers of philosophy. What does it do for people attached to their body? Lovers of riches and lovers of fame. Okay? Take nothing with you except your education and nurture, which are truly said to greatly benefit or also harm the dead. So we've got, this is a big one too. He's really dropping some truth bombs on us right now. Maybe rewarding us for all of our hard work. Good work. Our phronimotaton work. Phronimotatin. That benefits or harms the dead. Oh my goodness. Right? Those are hedonists who say, oh, there's no afterlife. Just be as tyrannical as you can. Yum, yum, yum. Pleasures, pleasures, pleasures. And the feeling of superiority by being racist or sexist or being a conservative fascist or whatever. Yay. Guns, guns, guns. Pew, 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 pew. Be a cowboy. Yeah. Because there's no significance in the afterlife. Well, actually, you're benefited or harmed in the dead, in that next realm of the invisible. Okay? From the very beginning of that journey in the place yonder. Right from the beginning. Which is interesting because right from the beginning of this text, Phaedo says, right at the beginning, page 3, Phaedo says, for me, it was a wonderful experience to be there at the end of Socrates' life. I did not feel pity as I expected. He appeared like a good daemon for me. Could this be a kind of phronimotaton? A kind of paideia and nurture? Both in his disposition, state of mind, and logos. Whoa, there's our state of mind and understanding of the latter. Since he met his end fearlessly and nobly, sounds like courage to me, so that it occurred to me that neither in that place of Hades, which is the invisible, translated, we just read that, same word, he was not going to be without divine providence. And that there he would also fare well. Let's get rid of pink on pink. He would fare well upon arriving, if anyone else ever had. Follow the logos as much as humanly possible. For all of these reasons, I had no feeling of pity, such as would seem natural to my present sorrow, nor in turn any pleasure, since we were engaged in philosophy, just as we had become accustomed to, nurtured. For indeed, the Logos was of that sort. Okay? He would fare well in that place as much as any human would. So, right from the beginning of that place, says Socrates, we will either be harmed or benefit. So we have maybe some ideas of benefit, have divine providence, and fare well ourselves. Based on what? Based on our pi days, how many pies you ate per day, which is the spiritual word for education, or the art of the logos, and your nurture, your virtues that you practice, you put into the soul until it upgrades into phronimotatin, phronesis. Greatly benefit or harm the dead from the very beginning of that place in the journey in the place yonder. Okay? Wow, he's dropping some truth bombs on us. Wow. So again, raising just as a good butcher does, raising the stakes. Raising the stakes, not just for this life, but the next. And by the way, also for all time. So hey, this realizing that we are immortal isn't the windfall that the wicked think. It means there's a meaning for us being here. There's a significance to our education and our nurture, to our how much we learn out of the logos, and how much virtues, and how we can bring them together in our state of self called phronesis. And if we can get the ideal of that, phronimotatin, throw some motators in, throw some motatos in, phronimotatin. Wow.
Wow.
Wow. Wow. All right. So, big stakes. Also, I can see in the next line, he mentions the daemon twice. And we just went back again. So we talked about rolling on our seeing, but also coming back to the start. We went back to the start. That's part of the learning, the sewing it together. You keep repeating, you keep reading. That's the practice. That's the nurture. That's what's needed for both the education and the nurture. We saw, hey, he seemed like he's going to fare well in the afterlife, which is why we came back. We greatly benefited, divine providence, and also do well. But also, we're not going to be harmed in our afterlife because we haven't, been nurturing through vice. So that brought us back. But we also, when we went back, we noticed the word daemon. That's been a huge question. In the apology, that's why they threw him in prison. He thought he had a daemon. And he appeared like a great daemon himself. So it seems to be very, very good. But it's a huge question. What the heck is a daemon? And can we be like a daemon? Is that, if our education and nurture leads to truth, good, and froni motadin, how does that relate to the daemon? Because that's a huge term being thrown in. And I can see it twice in the next sentence. So on that cliffhanger, I hope you join me next time. Let's see where this goes, because huge stakes, says the butcher. I should stop making that pun. I just explained why puns are bad. I should stop doing it. I'm only doing it to come back around and remind you of what we saw about puns being the shadow of true paideia, ousia, dialectic learning, and what's going to benefit us in this life and from the beginning of the next. So all that and the daemon next time. I hope you're having fun. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will see me next time. Feel free to join us in chat. Thank you so much for your comments and your support in chat. On Twitch, link below. You can subscribe and like on YouTube. You can, if you have the means, you greatly appreciate it if you want to support on Patreon. And you can find the text below for free. So, I hope to see you next time.
Systems are now fully operational.
Wow.
Come on, man. That's one for the blooper reel.
I hit the wrong button.
That's one for the blooper reel.
All right. See you next time. There we go.